And at number 7, we have College of Whisper Bard. This Bard subclass is all about uncovering secrets in order to extort and threaten their opponents by infiltrating and exploiting circles using their unique talents and powers. How do the Whispers Bards achieve this sort of feat? Well, for starters, let's take a look at what you get at 3rd level. Starting at 3rd level, you'll learn the Make Psychic Blades as well as Words of Terror features. Psychic Blades allows you to expend your Bardic Inspiration resource whenever you hit a creature with a weapon attack in order to deal 2d6 extra psychic damage to it. The extra damage of this feature also increases as you level up, becoming 3d6 at 5th level, 5d6 at 10th level, and 8d6 upon reaching 15th level. However, the only caveat is this can only be done once per round and only on your turn. Regardless, this extra damage is actually pretty solid for 3rd level. As for the second feature you'll learn while taking the subclass, Words of Terror, this one is more of an out-of-combat feature as it takes 1 minute to take effect and only while speaking to a humanoid creature alone. When this happens, you plant seeds of paranoia inside the creature's mind, forcing it to make a wisdom saving throw against your spell save DC once the conversation ends. Or else you become frightened of you or another creature of your choice for 1 hour, or until it sees an ally being attacked or damaged. One good upside of this feature is that creatures have no idea you're even trying to frighten them if they succeed in their saving throw, so you don't have to worry about them turning hostile immediately after. But you do have to finish a short or long rest to use it again, regardless of the outcome. This feature can be pretty good for setting up fights against politicians or high-ranking figureheads in order to force the creature to have disadvantage on attack rolls and ability checks before combat even starts. Another way you can use this is by having them become frightened and paranoid about someone planning to overthrow them, which might boil into something even more volatile as they might start having second thoughts about their current position. Maybe the captain might want to confront the source of their fear by having the second command thrown out or create other conflict as a result. The big thing about this feature is there's no range limit or any other sort of limitation in determining who that person is frightened of, as it only needs to be a creature that you choose. It could be someone in the other room or one on the other side of the world. And the usefulness of this feature can vary depending on how you try to manipulate them during your conversation, making this a pretty fun subclass feature to use. At 6th level, you gain the Mantle of Whispers, allows you to, once per short or long rest, use your reaction in order to magically capture the shadow of a humanoid that dies within 30 feet of you, which you can retain until you use it or until you finish a long rest. And what this shadow does is it allows you to use your action in order to assume a disguise that makes you look exactly like the person that died for 1 hour, or until you end the disguise as a bonus action. While you're disguised as this person, you gain general knowledge about them, through memories and details about their background and personal life, to the extent that you'll be able to pass off as them whenever needed. However, you don't gain access to any secrets the person may have known. You also gain a +5 bonus to your deception check whenever someone attempts to see through the disguise by making a contested insight check, giving you a good odds at fooling people due to how well you play the part. This is another subclass feature that is really fun for roleplay purposes, as it allows you to infiltrate certain circles that you or your party normally wouldn't be able to. However, it does require you to kill a key individual, which might not always be the best solution in some cases. But when it is the best or only solution, it can work wonders as a way of gathering key information that your party might be able to make use of if they need to. However, due to the limitations of being only disguised for 1 hour, you have to make absolutely sure that you use this shadow at the perfect opportunity, or else the person you killed would have died in vain, and might actually cause more problems depending on how important that person was. If it was a higher ranking individual, for example, people might start noticing they're missing and might start sending a search party after them or tighten their own security. So there are ups and downs for using this feature. Upon reaching 14th level, you gain the Shadow Lore feature, which allows you to, once per long rest, charm a creature within 30 feet of you for 8 hours as an action if they fail a wisdom saving throw against your spell save DC. This form of charm is perfect for forcing the creature to hear a whisper, a magical phrase only audible to them, convincing them that you know of their most mortifying secret. But you don't actually get to know what the secret is. It just thinks you do. While charmed in this way, the creature will be so afraid that you'll tell everyone its secret that it'll do anything you ask it to, except risk its life for you or fight for you, unless it was already inclined to do so. You'd also be able to obtain gifts and favors as it would be a close friend. Once the effect ends, the creature would have no understanding of why it was even afraid in the first place. In terms of combat prowess, this subclass does sport decent damage potential through its use of the Psychic Blade feature. However, the biggest downside to it is that it does use your Bardic Inspiration in order to fuel, which means taking away potential support from your allies, as Bardic Inspiration normally only allows you to give 1 to a creature so they might be able to use it and grant a d6 bonus. That increases at certain levels to 1 ability check, attack roll, or saving throw, potentially turning those failures into successes. And you only get a number of these equal to your Charisma modifier. However, if you have extra Bardic Inspirations to spend, then the extra psychic damage is really good, especially at higher levels, where your weapon attacks basically become psychic nukes against a single target at 15th level. As for the other subclass features, however, they require a lot to work to function in a way that you'd want them to. It kind of suffers from the Inquisitive Rogue subclass, where it wants to be in situations that your party might not normally be comfortable engaging in. A party that might not be catered to stealth, for example, might not want to send their Whisper Bard alone for an hour to gather information about a cult, especially if someone were to get lucky enough to see through the Bard's disguise. Unlike something like an Arcane Trickster Rogue that can not only disguise themselves as someone using the Dispel Disguise Self, but they can also be extremely stealthy or even become invisible if they need to be. And while Bards can learn both the Disguise Self and Invisibility spells, the Arcane Trickster just has more options for getting out of sticky situations if things happen to fall apart. They have more mobility options, Uncanny Dodge to reduce hit points once per turn, and typically high stealth, so they can make a quick getaway and regroup with the party if combat needs to happen. In fact, the Arcane Trickster can basically do the same things that a Whisper Bard can do, right up to being able to deal psychic damage by casting a 2nd level spell, Shadow Blade. Although not as strong as the Whisper's Bard's Psychic Blades, unless you proc Sneak Attack very often, which isn't that hard to do. But it can learn the Booming Blade cantrip, which also deals solid damage, especially if your DM allows you to use it with Shadow Blade, since by rules as written, you technically can't use them together. Arcane Tricksters can also use Zephyr and Charm Person spells, and can even impose disadvantage on creatures it targets with these saves due to its magical ambush feature at 9th level, so as long as the rogue is hidden when it casts these spells. And for spells like Charm Person specifically, if you're hidden while in combat and you cast a spell, the advantage the creature usually would have on the wisdom saving throw against you would just be normalized into a normal roll due to having disadvantage. And then you can just follow up with the Silvery Barbs if they do succeed the roll, since Silvery Barbs is only a 1st level spell that forces a creature that succeeds an ability check, attack roll, or saving throw to roll again and take the lowest number. And while yes, Bards inherently have access to these spells too, the Arcane Trickster definitely has an easier time using these spells, as opposed to Bards by simply being able to force his advantage on these saving throws. But ignoring spells and coming right back to the subclass features, the biggest problem with the Whisper Bards, and why it takes number 6 on this list, is due to the fact that all of these features require a lot of socializing with potentially dangerous people in order to get the most out of all the out-of-combat features. And the amount of payoff you get for all this is purely determined by your DM, since they'd be the one that would decide what kind of information they'd want you to get out of it and how much. And because of how much Whisper Bards want to socialize with other groups so they can infiltrate and manipulate, it might actually feel bad when you can't use your out-of-combat subclass feature simply because there might be more combat that day, or more exploration hanging out with your party members rather than trying to gather information on a dark secret or a cult or bandit group. And at number 6, we have the Assassin Rogue. This rogue subclass is all about capitalizing on the first strike in combat, and slaying foes before they even get a chance to react. They can do this by making use of their Assassinate feature, which they obtain at their level when taking the subclass. Assassinate allows you to have advantage on any attack roll you make during your first round of combat, so as long as the creature you're attacking hasn't taken a turn yet in combat. And if you manage to hit a creature that is surprised, it automatically crits. Surprise is a mechanic that allows you to ambush creatures before they have a chance to act. Essentially, a character looking to surprise a creature or a group of creatures must make a contested stealth check against the creature's passive perception score. If you roll higher than a creature's passive perception, then the creature will be surprised at the beginning of combat and will be able to do anything for the first round of combat, including taking actions and reactions until their turn comes up, in which case they do get a reaction until the end of the round. And because rogues tend to have a naturally higher than average stealth than most creatures, they can achieve this pretty consistently. Certain tables might run the surprise mechanics in other ways, however, such as making the first attack against someone mid-conversation to spice things up a little bit, so the stealth doesn't have to play a huge part in determining who is surprised. However, this does require a bit of setup in order to execute the auto-crit portion of the Assassinate feature, and so you might not be able to proc it as often as you'd like. A lot of times, combat can just happen on a dime, and most random encounters won't give you time to stealth up immediately. And while having advantage on any enemy that hasn't taken a turn in combat is strong, if you're willing to forego your movement for that turn, any rogue can basically achieve this with the steady aim feature from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. But not having to forsake your own movement is definitely a plus. Along with this feature, Assassin Rogues also gain proficiency with the Disguise and Poisoner's kits. Moving along to your 9th level feature, you gain the Infiltration Expertise feature, which allows you to spend 25 gold and 7 days of in-game time in order to create a completely false identity, including history, professions, and affiliations, but can't steal an identity that belongs to someone else. Afterwards, when you assume the disguise, creatures would believe your identity 100% with no obvious reason not to. While definitely a good feature to use to create the perfect infiltration disguise, The fact that it takes 7 whole days to do kind of makes this feature useless in most cases, since a lot of things can happen in in-game time within a few days anyway. But in the situations where you can pull this off, you basically have a free pass to critical information depending on who you're trying to gather knowledge from. Pretending to be a high-ranking member of the Big Bad Evil Guy's cult could go a long way when figuring out the Big Bad Evil Guy's motivations or master plans, or even how to defeat them or to just learn more about them in general by reading up on them in the cult's library. You might even get to learn about their pastimes, patrol routes, and day-to-day routines, which might help your party plan around for a big siege on the cult's base of operations. But outside of infiltrating big and important establishments, there isn't really any use for this feature that something like Disguise Self or Stealth might be able to accomplish in a more immediate fashion. At 13th level, you learn to become an imposter, gaining the ability to mimic the way someone talks, writes, or behaves perfectly. In order to do so, however, you have to spend at least 3 hours studying and examining these aspects of the creature. Once you do, however, you gain advantage on deception checks to avoid being found out if the creature does happen to become wary while being disguised as the person you're mimicking. This is definitely a supplemental feature used to reinforce your disguise using the disguise kit or other sources that allow you to mimic someone of importance, but isn't always required. Finally, at 17th level, you gain the Death Strike feature, which allows you to deal double damage to surprise creatures that you hit if they fail a Constitution saving throw, which is huge considering your Assassinate feature also lets you automatically crit when you land an attack on a surprise creature. With being able to proc Sneak Attack, automatically critting to double all of your dice, and then proccing Death Strike at the same time to further double that damage, this is probably one of the highest damage sources you can have on a character without hardcore min-maxing, since all you do is just take 17 levels of Assassination Rogue in order to do so. However, from the overall reliance on the surprise mechanic and the very specific situations required for your out-of-combat features to be useful, the Assassination Rogue takes number 6 on this list, because being able to disguise yourself in order to obtain information is something that can already be done in a number of other ways while achieving more immediate results, rather than spending 7 entire days creating a fake identity to fulfill a similar purpose. And at number 5, we have the Transmutation Wizard. This subclass is meant to be a master of altering the forms of physical and mental qualities of objects or creatures around you. For instance, when you take the subclass's 2nd level, you learn the Minor Alchemy feature, which allows you to temporarily alter the physical properties of wood, stone, iron, copper, or silver, changing them into any of the other materials that was listed. For every 10 minutes you perform this action, you can transform up to 1 cubic foot of material, and it stays that way for either an hour, or whenever you lose or drop concentration on the transmutation, whichever comes first. This is definitely not a feature you'd want to use in combat, since it takes 10 minutes to use and also uses your concentration, which you might need for spells that are actually important. Other than that, you also learn this same feature all other wizard subclasses learn that focus on a school of magic, where you're a savant and can spend half the amount of time and money copying spells from that school of magic into their spellbooks. In this case, transmutation spells. Things get a bit more interesting once you reach 6th level, learning how to make a transmuter stone by spending 8 hours creating such a stone. Once this is done, you may either keep it for yourself or give it to another creature in order to grant certain benefits to whoever possesses the stone. You can choose one of 4 buffs with creating the stone, but can change the buff by casting a transmutation spell 1st level or higher. As for what the buffs are, you are granted dark vision out to a range of 60 feet, increased movement speed by 10 feet while the creature is unencumbered, proficiency with constitution saving throws, and a resistance to acid, cold, fire, lightning, or thunder damage of your choosing when selecting this benefit. There isn't any limit for any one of the benefits. The creature just has to have the same stone in its possession. But there are other ways to use the stone, which you will learn to do upon reaching 14th level, where you become a master transmuter. This feature allows you to consume the magical reserve stones within the stone and choose one of the 4 effects. Whichever effect you choose destroys the stone and prevents you from making another until you finish a long rest. Major Transformation lets you choose a non-magical object that's no larger than a 5-foot cube and turns it into another non-magical object after handling the object for 10 minutes. The new object must follow the law of equivalent exchange and maintain a similar size and mass of equal or lesser value. Panacea allows you to remove any curse, disease, or poisons that are affected on a creature you touch with the stone, as well as restore all hit points to the target, which is an incredible feature, even if you can only do it once per stone. Restore Life allows you to cast Raise Dead without needing to know the spell or using spell slots. However, you still need the material component of a diamond worth at least 500 gold pieces in order to cast it. And Restore Youth does exactly what it says. A willing creature you touch with the stone has their age reduced by 3d10 years to a minimum of 13 years. But does not extend their lifespan. The weirdest thing about this feature is the fact that you do have to touch a creature with the stone for these effects to take place, which sort of incentivizes you to keep the stone in your possession rather than giving it to someone to benefit off of. But overall, the effects and benefits you learn as a Transmutation Wizard just aren't that great and are kind of niche. If you have someone that lacks Dark Vision, giving them the stone to gain Dark Vision is pretty neat. Increasing the movement speed of an already speedy ally is also pretty good. Proficiency in Constitution saving throws can help your fellow casters maintain concentration on spells whenever damage is taken. And resistance to one of the 5 basic elements that are interchangeable at the drop of a level transmutation spell is quite useful for how often you change the resistance on the fly. And at 14th level, Panacea would probably be the best effect you can use simply for the full heal. Simply imagine your nearly 200 hit point Bear Totem Warrior Barbarian finally reaches low hit points somehow, and you just show up with your Transmutation Stone and bring them back to full health, giving your GM another health bar to burn through. Of course, this isn't always going to happen, and maybe your healer gets focused down first. Bringing them the full hit points rather than using a potion or a low level healing spell to simply get them back into the battle is a better solution for ensuring the creature doesn't go down in a single hit next turn. And before we move on to the next spot on this list, there is one feature that hasn't been mentioned, which is Shape Changer at 10th level. But all that really does is teach you Polymorph and allows you to cast it for free once per short or long rest, but only to transform yourself into a beast whose CR is 1 or lower, which is okay for roleplay or new situations where being an animal might prove to be beneficial, and if you lack a druid already, but not really anything special. Honestly, if it weren't for Panacea being as good as it is, the Transmutation Wizard would be deserving of a much higher spot on this list.